This morning we had the Exchange Leaders panel at IDX. We covered a range of topics. I think being the first in-person conference for some time, we spent some time on the obligatory discussions around COVID and how the exchange infrastructure and the broader environment had performed during COVID and what our plans were coming back in. From an ICE perspective, my sense is that our organization and our customers and the clearing member community performed extremely well. We had unprecedented levels of volatility and volume in the market last year. Of course, last year, April, we were dealing with negative oil. Into the summer, we were talking about the prospect of negative gas, which didn't happen in the end. But it was incredible and an incredible time. And I thought that the community performed extremely well. My own sense is that I think we are still better in person. I've been in the office since July last year, and perhaps that just gives you an inkling of where I am on the spectrum. But I think we are better. I think we're more intense, and I think we perform better. But I still think that the broader industry and our organization, performed extremely well over the last little while. So we touched on that. We then moved on again, which is, I suppose, somewhat obligatory in these sorts of discussions on the impact of regulation. What we were feeling kind of post-Brexit, and we've seen a few things coming out of the UK government and the regulators here. My sense again is that we're very supportive of the direction of travel that the Chancellor is taking the UK in terms of re-looking at the whole regulatory environment within the UK, thinking about right-sizing some of that regulation for UK markets. And I don't think anybody's talking about a burning of regulation, if you like, but it's really about taking an EU model which worked for the 28 and thinking about how that applies to a UK context. And then I also mentioned that my personal opinion, again, is that changes to regulation that are good for global markets operated in the UK, frankly, are probably good for global markets operated anywhere. And so my inkling is that although the pace may change and the style of regulation may change, the EU is typically rule-based and the UK is typically more principle-based regulation. So while style may vary, while timing may vary, my inclination is that actually, global regulations and regulators are going to move in similar directions. And so I don't think the so-called massive divergence in regulation between the UK and the EU is really going to materialize. I think it's incumbent on all jurisdictions to make sure they're aligned with global best practices. So, so we're feeling pretty good about that. We're, keen to see a lot of the discussions that we've seen in the UK, whether that's in the Wholesale Markets Review or Lord Hill's listings review or the Khalifa review on technology, to see some of that implemented through legislation and through the regulators. So, we're looking forward to seeing that actually materialize. But, we're feeling pretty positive about the direction of travel on that. And then we moved into talking about some of the products that we're working on at the moment. So, sustainability is becoming a big theme for all of us. And, Matt at the LME had some things to say there. And as I spent time talking about some of the developments in our environmental market complex and the importance the important role that carbon pricing plays in the transition. We talked a bit about the fact that we're on a constant journey of transition here. We started off back in the day really relying on human muscle to do anything and to move things about. And we transitioned from human muscle into using animals. And we transitioned from that into using steam, and from there into burning hydrocarbons. And now we're transitioning into renewables. So really, we're on a continuum of transition, if you like. And in all cases, it's the previous energy source, if you like, that has helped to fund and drive the new energy source. And so it's very similar to what we're seeing now, where companies that are involved in taking hydrocarbons out of the ground and producing energy in that way are helping to fund and facilitate some of the new energy sources. And similarly, the markets that we operate, many of them around oil and natural gas, we believe those will have a role to play for a very long time. But they're also helping to facilitate some of the transition. So we've seen in the UK, and we're starting to see in Europe, the transition from coal in the merit order for power generation to natural gas. A lot of that has been facilitated through three numbers: the price of carbon, the price of gas, and the price of coal. And so quite simply, economics takes over because we're now able to price the externalities of pollution. And we also then talked a bit about new markets developing around renewable energy certificates in the US and soon to be in Europe and the EU and the UK as well. So lots of exciting developments there. And then we also spend a bit of time talking about competition and the challenges associated with launching new exchanges. We at ICE have recently launched a new exchange in Abu Dhabi. I think, John, since the last time we met, that's one of the things that's happened. And that's been an exciting initiative for us. And really the decision point for us there was a great opportunity to partner with ADNOC as the UAE is starting to, or has already at the time, we're starting to decide about making its oil freely traded, and was keen to provide for a marketplace and provide an environment for a marketplace. And we managed to develop together with them the concept of ICE Futures Abu Dhabi and launching urban futures on that. And 6 months in, it's doing well. We've got open interest sitting at around 50,000 lots, ADVs north of 5,000 lots. So, and new participants coming into that market, all the time. And one of the particularly exciting things for me has been the fact that we're seeing new Asian traders who have historically not been involved directly in hedging their price risk are starting to get involved now. There are over 60 refiners that run Murban. So there's a big community, and these things take time, of course, to get that community involved. But it's exciting when you're in a new market and you're getting new players coming into the marketplace. And once they're connected into ICE, of course, there's the broader product set that we can put in front of them as well. So that's been exciting. And then I think finally we talked a little bit about some of the broader initiatives that all of our companies are involved in, whether it's data or the like. But I think the general point is all of the companies involved here and all of the exchange groups are very global and involved in multiple places within the marketplace. I don't know from a cash equity perspective, which is typically the place that retail will play in. Of course, in the US, this phenomenon of retail playing a bigger part in US equity markets has been clear through lockdown. And but yeah, we've seen interest coming back into our single stock futures and in individual equity options, which we host on ICE Futures Europe. And so that really took a dip last year, and some of that had to do with uncertainty around dividend payments. Obviously, a lot of companies last year were shoring up their balance sheets rather than paying the same sort of divvies that they did in the past. So all of that's coming back. So yeah, year on year compares for our single stock futures and options business is looking solid. And we've also seen a good amount of interest coming back into FTSE 100 and the FTSE 250. And that's an interesting dynamic actually in the equity markets that we host. We tend to spend a lot of time talking about our energy markets. But if we think about the FTSE franchise, which we host here on ICE Futures Europe, one of the things that became clear around the time of Brexit and really since Brexit is that the FTSE 100 index, which is the sort of traditional UK benchmark index and continues to have a huge amount of interest globally, of course, isn't necessarily the best proxy for local UK corporates. And so we've seen a lot of interest coming into the FTSE 250, which has much greater weighting, of course, in those slightly larger, medium-sized enterprises, and has much more sterling-denominated business in it than the FTSE 100 does in relative terms. Because, of course, a lot of the larger FTSE 100 companies are dollar-denominated. And so when you try to track a sterling-denominated index where there's that FX impact of the sterling-dollar exchange rate, it isn't always clear how that dynamic works. So we've seen more interest coming into FTSE 250, which has been exciting to see. And then more broadly, across the ICE group, our MSCI futures contracts, have continued to grow very well. And we host the emerging markets, MSCI emerging market futures contract, and then we've got the sort of more developed index as well on the MSCI side. So there's an interesting dynamic as money flows from the developing market into the emerging market, the developed market into the emerging market, and both of those contracts have done well. Thankfully, I think we've seen peak Brexit. It probably was mentioned once or twice, but it was pretty incessant from 2016 through to the end of last year. But it's now happened. And we're now in a new normal. And, I think the context in which people now talk about actually what they mean is regulatory change. And frankly, if we take a step back from Brexit as a concept, what's happened is we've seen 10 plus years of significant regulatory implementation globally post-financial crisis. And we're in that phase now where after 10 years of significant implementation, all the major jurisdictions are going through what they implemented and doing that necessary fine-tuning. With the best will in the world, you could never get all of this right first time round. And so there's a very much needed process now of going through all of that and finding those things that didn't work and fixing them. That's got nothing to do with Brexit. It just happens to be the case now that the UK and the EU are looking at that same starting point and thinking about the respective improvements that need to be made. And those improvements, while consistent from a thematic perspective, may end up in slightly different places in terms of how they're implemented. But that doesn't change the fact that the kind of principle will be the same. So that, to me, is the context in which people now talk about Brexit, but it's really not Brexit. It's about regulatory change and refinement going forward. One of the biggest challenges we face over the next 30 years is how do we double energy production to facilitate the emerging middle class in Asia? So there'll be about 2 billion new people entering the middle class in Asia that will have energy demands. So we need to double our energy output, but at the same time, over the same period of time, we've got to move to net zero. So how do we increase our production but reduce our carbon output? This is a significant challenge that we all face globally, and I wouldn't I, but I believe markets have got a very important role to play in that. And so we think about the function of markets being around risk management and capital raising, the ability for ICE to provide risk management services to our customers and to launch new markets and provide additional pricing transparency, all of which will help facilitate this journey of creating extra production, energy production, but reducing carbon emissions. Futures markets are hedging vehicles. They provide risk management capability, but they also help companies to smooth the volatility in their revenues, which result in the ability for companies to raise more capital. And that capital can then be deployed into investment into cleaner energy. So there's this whole role that we can play as ICE with our energy portfolio, which we spend a lot of time building a portfolio that isn't just focused on one geography and isn't just focused on one type of energy. So we've got markets that reflect the US dynamic. We've got markets that reflect the European and the global dynamic, and we've got markets that reflect the dynamic in Asia. So the launch of JKM in Asia and the emergence of that now as the natural gas benchmark for Asia, alongside TTF, which is our European natural gas benchmark, and increasingly is becoming the global benchmark for gas. Those markets are going to play, and already playing, a very important part in the coal to natural gas switching in the power generation stack that I was referring to earlier. With the launch of Murban, the existing Dubai market that we've got out in Asia. So, when I think about our global energy franchise, which is geographically diverse, is diverse across the various energy sources, and now the opportunities that we're getting around carbon markets to help put a price against those externalities. So the positive externality, if you like, of generating energy, renewable energy from renewable sources, and indeed our compliance markets, which effectively, if you like, you could think of as a license to emit, where that cap is then reduced over time. Those markets provide price transparency on the externalities, and as a result of that, will erode the green premium. So the whole 30-year journey, which is going to take us from where we are now to 2050, with energy production doubled by then, and hopefully the meeting of the Paris objectives of net zero by then is going to require a pretty heavy lift from everybody, and markets are going to play a central part in that. So I'm very excited about the opportunities that presents to us in supporting our customers facilitate that journey. We've announced that on the weekend of the 18th, 19th of December, so after close of play on Friday, the 17th of December, we will transition any residual open interest that's in the LIBOR product into the equivalent RFR contract. So whether that's sterling LIBOR into SONIA or Euro Swiss into Sarin. So frankly, come that weekend, everybody's transitioned. The choice is whether they transition themselves in the marketplace between now and then, or whether they just let their positions sit until that weekend and we transition them. So there isn't an option to hold out beyond that. And I suppose the other way to think about it is there's a fallback for anybody who hasn't been able to transition in the market for whatever reason. So what we are seeing is the liquidity in the SONIA market in particular has become fantastic. And so it does provide the option to those players who want to transition in the marketplace.